Honorable C.V. Vigneswaran, you have 7 minutes.
Honorable Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity. From the time politics was allowed to enter the hallowed precincts of our public service, vindictiveness and favoritism by one set of politicians in power has been alleged by the opposition. When the opposition politicians came to power, subsequently, victimization of their supporters by the previous regime had been alleged. The opposition then in power thereafter went on to favor those in the public service who supported them. We have forgotten that this pernicious practice is the outcome of the politicization of our public service. Neither Parliament nor politicians should interfere with the public service. That would violate the principle of separation of powers enshrined in Article 4 of the Constitution. The public service is part of the executive, no doubt. However, even the President and the Cabinet have only limited power in respect to the public service. The Constitution contains 3 chapters dealing with the executive, 7, 8, 9. Chapter 9 deals with the public service. The only power that the Cabinet has over the public service is at a policy level. Article 55(4) of the Constitution states as follows: subject to the provisions of the Constitution, the Cabinet of Ministers shall provide for and determine all matters of policy relating to public officers. Unquote. The Constitution, in its wisdom, does not permit even the President nor the Cabinet of Ministers to interfere with the workings of the public service. Cabinet can only give policy guidance. In other words, Cabinet cannot interfere with the decision of whom to prosecute. That decision is for the Attorney General and the Attorney General alone. It is probably for this reason that His Excellency the President has not sought to include the Attorney General within the ambit of the Commission of Inquiry, despite naming several other institutions. However, it is shocking to note that the Commission has decided to embark upon its own voyage and decided to persecute even the prosecutors. Yesterday, somebody was talking about one of the Attorney General's Department lawyers, State Counsel. The Cabinet is responsible to Parliament in the discharge of the functions. If Cabinet itself can only give policy decision in the policy direction to the public service, then what can Parliament do in its supervisory capacity? It can only question Cabinet on its policy directives. Parliament can also pass legislation ensuring that specific safeguards are built into the system to prevent political victimization. But it certainly cannot be involved in giving any directions to the public service at the individual level. That would be grave transgression of the Constitution and violative of Articles 4 and 55. Honorable Jayanta Veerasinghe, Attorney at Law, who had appeared before me in several cases when I was High Court Judge Colombo, yesterday gave a detailed description of what happened to his clients, including Mr. Basil Rajapaksa during the Yahapalana government. It was very dramatic and descriptive, no doubt. But if individuals or their attorneys at law felt that evidence had been manufactured against them or that they have been politically victimized, they have numerous avenues open to them to indicate their rights through the judiciary. First, a person can raise the objections in the criminal case itself. They can invoke the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in terms of Article 126 of the Constitution for the violation of their fundamental rights. They can invoke the writ jurisdiction of the Court of Appeal in terms of Article 140. They can institute proceedings for malicious prosecution and seek damages. The powers of the judiciary are so wide that injustice can be prevented and damages avoided. The executive and the legislature simply have no role to play at the individual level. Individuals must seek the assistance of the judiciary. The idea that political victimization by a previous regime should be looked into by special commissions and committees is anathema to the rule of law. It has no place in the context of Article 126 of the Constitution. Article 126(1) of the Constitution states as follows: the Supreme Court shall have sole and exclusive jurisdiction to hear and determine any question relating to the infringement or imminent infringement by executive of administrative action of any fundamental right or language right declared and recognized by Chapter 3 or 4. Therefore, it is my view that the entire idea of the appointment of a Presidential Commission of Inquiry to inquire into and obtain information pertaining to the alleged incidents of political victimization of public officers, employees of state corporations, members of the armed forces and the
Honourable Member, you have 2 more minutes.
Was misplaced. The public service must be allowed to do its duty objectively, not to please those in power politically. If the appointment of the said commission was a folly, the commission itself, called by Honorable Sarath Fonseca yesterday as Pisupusa Commission, has proceeded to, with visible glee into territories that angels fear to tread. It is clear that there are several cases that are presently pending in relation to the matters inquired into by the Commission. The Commission is not a body recognized by Article 105 of the Constitution as an institution for administration of justice. It simply has no business having anything to do with matters pertaining to the judiciary. All the actions by the Commission in respect of pending cases would constitute a clear interference with the judiciary and as such would be in violation of Article 111C, which states that any interference
Honourable member, please wind up.
Would be an offence recognized in the Constitution itself. If this debate seeks in any manner to implement the so-called recommendation of this Commission, this House too would be violating Article 111C. That is probably why, despite the ill-advised wording of the motion, no directions are being sought from the House. Having said this, I need to make my observations from a different standpoint. Though the recent events and activities seem to point to the death knell to democracy, rule of law, and the independence of the public service and judiciary from the point of view of Tamils who have suffered at the hands of the successive Sri Lankan governments by being denied justice so far.
Member, please wind up.
Just half a minute. This action of appointing a commission and accepting a report of this nature by this government is welcome to us Tamils in a perverse way. It is welcome because it highlights exactly what was recently said in Geneva. It gives a wonderful example of how the government in Sri Lanka perverts the course of justice. It proves what is being said by Tamils. The government of Sri Lanka cannot be trusted to allow justice to take its own course. This is why Tamils human rights organization and the UN are clamoring for the appointment of international tribunals. If those accused of corruption will not be allowed to face trial, what hope is there to getting war criminals tried? Those of you in the government that blame the diaspora, the NGOs and the West for allegedly persecuting Sri Lanka should look hard at what you are doing right now. It is you who is letting the country down by such dubious methods. And I conclude, none of us have the right to say that we alone love this country. If the majority in this country had acted humanely, prudently and with foresight, this country would not be in the dire straits it is today. Our youth would not have taken up arms. I hope we change our ways and tread towards sanity, unity and prosperity. I thank you, sir.
Thank you.